All right. Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of Perspectives, third-party talk show with Bill Redpath of the Libertarian Party and myself, David Rych of the Green Party. We get together here and we chat about current events, politics, economics, what have you, from a third-party perspective.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And so, yeah, so far so good. Bill, welcome back. You took last week off because you were doing something very cool. So why don't we kick it off with that?
Well, I am. I was actually petitioning last Tuesday in Toledo, Ohio, for the Libertarian Party of Ohio petition for the presidential ticket to be on the ballot in Ohio in November 2024. And in the past, sometimes we've done a party petition, which qualifies the Libertarian Party as a full party for the ballot, up and down the ballot. And I think the people then have to get some signatures, but very few signatures to put themselves on the ballot. And anyway, we're not doing that this time because it's 40,345 valid signatures, and that is a very difficult requirement, and we don't have the wherewithal right now. We don't have the resources to do that. So we're doing an independent petition. We can start now because substitution is allowed in Ohio. That is, we can circulate a petition with names. There's an Ohioan and a Kentuckian from the Libertarian Party on there as the placeholders on the petition. But I explained to people that the National Convention for the Libertarian Party will be held Memorial Day weekend 2024 in Washington, D.C. And at that time, the actual presidential ticket will be selected. And everybody says, okay, not a problem. And so it's 5,000 valid signatures on this petition as opposed to 40,345. So last Monday, I guess that was August 7, I drove over to Toledo on Monday. I visited my 93-year-old uncle. I visited him and then his daughter and her husband and had a good time, then went out to dinner at Loma Linda's. It's a long-time Mexican restaurant, been around since 1955.
Wow.
That's out near the Toledo airport. And I have... My friends and I have, an emotional tie to the place. We've been going there I've been going there on and off for 44 years.
Wow.
They're even longer, probably, going there. And so we got together for dinner there on Monday night, but then it had to hit the hay because the alarm was going off at 5:05 a.m. Yes, because the polls were open 6:30 a.m. to 7:30 p.m. So I got over there at 6:30 a.m. When the polls opened, and I petitioned for 13 hours, really nonstop, except for going to the restroom. And I ran over to a Burger King to grab some fast food breakfast. But then I didn't get hungry the rest of the day
because it's just loaded with grease and fat.
It had been going, but then 3 Mountain Dews, Fountain Mountain Dews, got me through the rest of the day. But I was not hungry then until I got home. Drove back to Chicago, then got home about 11 p.m. Central Time. So anyway, but I did 345 signatures in 13 hours, and it was a good day. I did 5 signatures on Monday from friends and relatives, and then 345 on Tuesday. So I was averaging over 13 hours, about 26 and a half per hour. And you take out the time that I was running over to get the Mountain Dews or breakfast or hitting the head. So I averaged, taking that out, probably about 1 signature every 2 minutes all day long. And so it was really, but you ran into the various problems. Petitioners face. Have you done any petitioning? I presume you have, but have you done any petitioning?
Yes, but not like out on the streets. I mean, like I was a bartender at the time, so I would just hand them out to people at the bar.
I see, but you've never seen strangers out on the street.
Strangers in the bar, not on the street now.
Okay, all right. Well, in any event, it's quite an experience that few people partake in, and But you run into problems, these various hassles, and one of them was when I got there, I knew there was a law in Ohio stating that you were to be 100 feet from the door. They say like no electioneering. You're not supposed to be handing out literature, but I'm not affecting the election. I mean, the vote was on issue 1, that proposed constitutional amendment in Ohio. I was petitioning to get the Libertarian Party presidential ticket on the ballot in November.
Oh, you were there for that. Oh, I didn't even put those two together. That's exciting stuff.
Yes, I went over, because it was election day.
That was huge.
Right? That's why I went over on for August 8th.
Gotcha.
And so in any event, so I knew they had a sign. I knew the sign saying, no election. It didn't say no handing out literature or campaigning. Yeah, that's it. No campaigning or handing out literature beyond this point. And I knew that sign was less than 100 feet from the door. All right. But I stood a little bit behind that. It wasn't a problem until 9 a.m. And at 9 a.m., they see 3 election officials come out of the door. This is at Toledo Waite High School, spelled Waite. And the election, the polling place was in the gymnasium at this high school in Toledo. And I see these 3 election officials come out holding a gold rope. And I knew what was going to happen. They were going to hang me. Just kidding. But no, I figured what it was they were going to measure off. I figured, they're bringing that rope out to measure 100 feet from the door. And they did. And they brought the rope down the steps and out. And so they moved the sign back. All right. And so you wasn't supposed to go beyond that sign, which was a minor problem, but not a big deal. There was a parking lot there. I was walking around the parking lot, clearly more than 100 feet away. Well, then sometime early afternoon, some election officials come out again, and this one guy yells out, he says, "You're supposed to be 100 feet from the building. You have to go way over there." And I yelled back at the guy. I go, "It's not 100 feet from the building. It's 100 feet from the entrance to the polling place." All right, with big difference. Yes. And so these 3 people were out there. Oh, and then there were there were 3 petitioners there circulating an initiative in Ohio, also petitioning, circulating an initiative to raise the minimum wage in Ohio. And they asked me to sign. I said, no, I can't. I live in Illinois. And so in any event, these 3 officials kind of stood around, and I saw one guy get on his cell phone, and I heard one guy say, "Oh, we're going to call the cops." And I thought, well, okay, fine, go ahead and call the cops. I've had policemen, I've had to face policemen before when I've been petitioning. Sure. And so ultimately no cops showed up. And I think they called in and found out that my assertion was correct, that I was 100 feet from the door, 100 feet from the door, not 100 feet from the building. So, and anyway, and then it went pretty smoothly the rest of the way. And then the vice chair of the Libertarian Party of Ohio, who lives in Toledo, came by. I signed off on the signatures, counted up the signatures, signed off on them, had to put my name and address, and it was a circulator statement saying that I personally witnessed the signatures, which I did. Fortunately, no notarization was needed. That really is a pain in the butt when you've got to go get your signatures notarized. I don't have to do that in Ohio, so I could just sign off on the signatures, hand them off to the vice chair, get in the car, drive home. And it was a successful trip. I'm glad I did it.
Well, good. I'm glad. Were there other people besides yourself doing it? Like, I mean, how many did the group of you get all day, do you think?
Well, everybody else, the effort among other people in the Libertarian Party of Ohio wasn't that good. They got, I've got an exact number. I mean, my exact number, I counted them, and the vice chair took them, and he looked at it, 350. Everybody else combined maybe did 100 signatures, is what I've been told by the chair. Not a good organizing effort there for it. And, somebody told me, well, it probably won't be a very good turnout. And I said, I bet it will be a good turnout. And it was. There were the Republican Party of Ohio scheduled this proposed Constitution amendment on August 8th, thinking there was going to be a low voter turnout in August. But there was such a backlash from this initiative that there was such a negative backlash that people turned out in droves. So I thought it would be good turnout, and it was.
Very cool. Yeah, no, I mean, there's a lot of people kind of speculating at this point. It's only speculating, but that the overturning of Roe versus Wade, the ripple effect of that is going to cost the Republicans the election in 2024. Like everybody, like too many people are like pro-choice. They're not having it. You know, Kansas did it, now Ohio did it, and like, you know,
well, Ohio hasn't done it yet. They did not pass issue 1, but the abortion constitution amendment is coming up in November in Ohio.
Right.
All right, so it's coming up now 12 weeks from today, I think. Okay. So in any event, that's going to be a major vote. But yeah, I mean, in fact, the Wall Street Journal has been warning the Republican Party time and again. They've had several editorials over the past year saying that the abortion issue is going to be a real problem for the Republican Party. And I said it years ago to people. I said that Roe v. Wade was the pro-life politician's best friend.
Right.
It was, because they could go ahead and state their position, but not have to answer for it, because they weren't going to be able to change things in the state legislature much anymore. Much. And now that's different. And so, yeah, I mean, the Republicans may have a tough time in 2024 for other reasons, but as well. But yeah, it's I think that it's time for a major rethink in the pro-life political movement in this nation.
Yeah, no, for sure. Well, it'll be interesting to see what happens. So let me ask you. I want to ask you about like your approach, because, like I said, I had it easy when I did mine, and because like you were in my turf, and like I could just say, "Hey, I'm running for this," and he was like, "Sure, great." What's your approach to people? Like, because a lot of people are put off by at petitioning because it's so like just daunting.
Well, I will admit that I'm a person who is not afraid of public speaking.
Okay, good.
And I was a state finalist in extemporaneous speaking when I was in high school, and used to work in radio. So, I mean, to that extent, so I'm not afraid of public speaking. But it's and the petition, by the way, what I'm about to say is certainly no defense of the high petition requirements around the nation. I mean, people from other nations are truly shocked when they hear how many signatures are required to get on the ballot in the United States, in so many states. That said, it's not that hard to do. Here's my pitch. The toughest thing is finding a good location. Usually, okay, it's finding a decent location can at sometimes be difficult. And because post offices won't let you petition, the Postal Service, unless it's on a public sidewalk in front of the place, you can petition. But if it's a suburban situation where you drive in off the street and park in the parking lot and walk up to the post office, you can't stand there and petition under post office regulations. And that's been litigated, unfortunately. But in any event, where was I going with it? Oh yeah, the pitch. It's just, and I've been petitioning strangers for 35 years now, so I've honed the pitch. Excuse me, sir. And by the way, whatever pitch works for a given person, do it.
Sure.
Okay.
There's not like one universal standard, right?
And I've heard some strange ones. Okay, but my pitch is, excuse me, sir or ma'am. Could you sign a petition to allow the Libertarian Party to return to the ballot in Illinois next year? Could you, let me take two. Excuse me, sir or ma'am, could you sign a petition to allow the Libertarian Party to return to the ballot in such and such a state this year, next year, whatever? It's not an endorsement. It's not saying you'll vote for us, but we need the signatures of X number of signatures, just to get on the ballot and give people a choice. Could you sign our petition, please? That's it. All right. And it's in, I've heard, somebody once said to me, you're giving too much information there. I don't think I am. And I like to put in the number of signatures we've got to get, because people don't know. It's informative. I get shocked reactions at times, like last year for the statewide slate, the Libertarian Party to make the ballot in Illinois, 25,000 valid signatures. A lot of people are truly shocked by that number. and you get some sympathy signatures because of that, and so in any, but and some people will say, sure, if you want to be on the ballot, fine. Other people will begin asking questions. It used to be that libertarianism or libertarians were not as well known as they are today.
Sure.
But if you go to certain areas, I'll put it this way, there are certain areas where it is like stepping back in time 30 years, where if you are dealing, I'll say, with lower socioeconomic groups, and you will run into a lot of people who do not know what a libertarian is,
sure,
do not know what libertarian means, and you've got to and stop and explain it. And I say something along the lines of, Libertarian Party stands for libertarianism. We stand for both economic freedom and personal freedom. We generally take conservative positions on economic issues, generally liberal positions on social issues, but there is a core theme, and that is we think people should be able to live their lives as they choose without interference, as long as they are not harming other people or their property. Consequently, we call for reduced government spending, reduced taxes, and real respect for people's civil liberties. And that is my pitch, a high-level pitch. And sometimes they want to know more, but usually that does it, and they either decide to sign or not. And I got a lot of turn downs. Oh, we can't split the vote. I would sign it, but we can't split the vote next year. We can't do that.
Right. You hear that almost every election cycle.
Yeah, but it's a
There's something more going on.
A little more prevalent right now.
Yes, because Trump's a freak.
Mm.
I get that. But okay, well, that's very cool, man. Yeah, and like, so have you heard other people's like approaches? Like, I'm just really curious, like, being somebody also who has no problems with like public speaking, being a bartender really kind of cracked that shell completely. Like, I can talk to anybody anywhere.
Sure.
But I see other people that are very, very shy about things, and you seem to have like a very direct, like informative approach. Like, oh, hey, this is what we're doing. This is why. What do you think?
Yeah,
you ever have any like car salesman kind of libertarians that go like, hey, sir, I bet you I got some good news for you. If you,
there are some libertarians who want to use the pitch. They don't want to use the L word, and they'll say, I'm trying to get a friend on the ballot. Something like that. And I use the L word, and it works pretty well. And some people don't react. One guy was you run into hostile people. I've never been assaulted. Okay. Never been spat on. I've been cussed at. I was laughed at. One guy laughed at me last week and said I was a failed pedo. All right. So like a
pedophile?
Yeah, that's how I took it. He said I was a failed pedo. Okay, I'll take that as a no. You're not going to sign a petition.
Yeah.
I didn't say that to him, but that's what I thought.
Yeah,
so I don't, it to each his own. Hey, whatever works. I once stood outside a supermarket. This goes back 35 years ago. I remember petitioning in Massachusetts outside a supermarket in 1988. And there was another petitioner there who set the clipboard on a trash can. There's those trash cans that have tops to them, and you stick underneath the top, you stick your hand in and drop the trash into the bin. But there's a top over that hole. Well, those make lovely desks sometimes, and so you put the clipboard on there. Somebody be pushing their shopping cart out the door, the exit door of the supermarket, and he would say to them, "Hey, have you signed this?" Okay, that was his pitch. All right, hey, have you signed this? And it worked well for him. People wanted to know what it was, but that was a weird thing. And a lot of people also kick off with the question. I tell people in my pitch, we need registered voters to sign the petition. All right, but I don't like leading off with the question, are you a registered voter, or are you an Ohio registered voter, or Illinois? I don't like that, because I think it gives people an easy out to say no. And I I just don't like that question to kick off a petitioning pitch. I tell people in the pitch that they need to be registered to vote, and some people will say, oh, and they'll say I'm not registered to vote. You would be amazed, absolutely amazed, how many people will come right out and say I'm a convicted felon. I think a lot of people. It's amazing. Some people say I can't vote, so I interpret it that way. But a lot of people right up front, I'm a convicted felon, and just okay, thank you, have a nice day. Some woman, when I was in Arkansas earlier this year, some woman was about to sign the petition, and then she goes, oh, I'd better not. She says, there's a warrant out for me. And then she kind of like puts her hands behind her back and laughs. Yeah, she says, oh, about to sign it. Oh, I better not. I got a warrant out, so okay. A nice day. So anyway, so it that's what, but to each his own, whatever works, as long as you're being honest with people, whatever works.
Right. Can you speak to like the efforts made by the Republican Party, the Democratic Party in respective states once the ballots are handed in by third parties, and how they just like go over it with a fine-tooth comb and try to like find every problem? Like, what sort of problems could they find legally to get your name off of that petition?
What do you mean to get my name off to get a?
Let's say you have, okay, so like the Libertarian Party gets, let's say they get enough signatures. To keep the math simple, they get 1,000 signatures. They only needed 500. Okay, they got their 1,000 signatures. They hand it into whatever authority place that
Board of Elections. Yeah,
Board of Elections. Okay, at that point, I know it happened in Illinois, so I'm assuming it happens in every state. Is that some lawyers from the Democratic Party and the Republican Party like go to that petition and they try to find problems with the signature to get it off the petition?
Actually, that's in a minority of states. It's true. It happens in Illinois. It happens in Pennsylvania. It happens in New York. But it's a minority of states actually that have this challenge process. Usually what happens is that the signatures are handed in to the state board of elections, and state employees validate the signatures, right? And you either have enough or you don't. Yeah, it's having a challenge process. It makes it just a big hassle. It's just another in my recent column op-ed that appeared. Now it's been 5 weeks, I think, since it was in the Chicago Tribune. I called the challenge process a Kafkaesque process, whereby the major parties in this state, one or the other, try to terrorize people off the ballot by, and you got to show up. Like if there's a challenge, you got to show up with a bunch of people at the State Board of Elections in Springfield. It is and then you sit there. The way it works is that there's a state employee and there's a person that is the challenger and somebody defending the signatures, person from each side, and they sit down with this state employee and go down through this whole process. Well, you know what? State employee could do that on his or her own. You don't need, but it's just, one more difficulty to pile on to try to make it difficult for people to make the ballot.
Interesting. Yeah, that's it's really unfortunate. So I'm glad it's a minority of states. I just assumed everybody, if they had the opportunity to do it, anybody would do it, and from the duopoly, because like that's just a great advantage of theirs to be able to like, oh, sorry, I don't know, is that a T or is that like an S? I don't even know. Off.
Oh no. I've defended signatures in Pennsylvania back when I was living on the East Coast, but in Pennsylvania in 2012, and the Republicans brought in a handwriting expert. Yeah, no, they brought in a handwriting expert, and she, the thing is that these petitions are signed out on the street. It's not like you're sitting down
they're standing out
on the street, and there were times when her objections were way more picayune than they should have been. And I refuse to concede on a lot of those signatures. Nope, I'm not conceding that signature. That's going to the judge. I'm not conceding that.
You don't concede it, then it stays on the petition, then it goes to the judge and they decide?
Well, I mean, for those, I mean, there are some that you've got to concede. You've got to concede in some instances. Person's not registered to vote, or
Oh, okay.
whatever. But there are times when there's disagreement, and as to whether a signature is valid, and those ultimately have to be resolved by an independent party.
Seems like a very again daunting task to do that. Like if you have a place where you need 40,000 signatures, you're gonna go like literally one by one.
Yeah.
And look at it like who wants to. That's a drag.
Oh yes, I mean no, I mean that's why you got to have a lot of people there. And in Pennsylvania, it used to be, I'm pretty sure it's not this way anymore, but it used to be that if you handed in petitions, I know that Ralph Nader was assessed a judgment, and so was, I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the Green Party's. It's been a while since I've been in. Anyway, there was a Green
Jill
Party.
Stein?
Pardon?
Jill Stein?
No, a candidate in Pennsylvania, not presidential.
Okay.
And I'm blanking on his name right now. It's been years since I've talked with him, but in Pennsylvania, if you handed in signatures and you were not successful in your defense of those signatures, the challenger could ask for their attorney's fees from you.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Now I don't think it's that way anymore. I'm pretty sure that's no longer the case. But I remember Ralph Nader at one point got an $80,000 assessment, and Carl, again, I'm blanking on his name. Carl, I think, is his first name. But in any event, he was running for U.S. Senator something in Pennsylvania. But that was truly horrible, where if you didn't get enough valid signatures and did not concede, and they would hold the sword of Damocles over the Constitution Party, the Green Party, other parties. If you concede right now and just go away and admit you're not, and just concede and you're not on the ballot, we won't pursue you for money. But if you stay to fight this and you lose, we're coming after you for attorney's fees. Yeah,
that's crazy.
Yeah,
that's craziness.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just stupid. Okay. Well, I hope you're right that it's no longer the case, because that's
it was horrible.
Very odd.
Absolutely horrible.
Yeah, it creates like that's such like an overwhelming force against you to kind of freely choose to either concede or not.
Mm-hmm.
That I would consider that coercion, actually, that's a force greater than your reason to think for yourself, and which is what coercion is. And coercion is something that shouldn't be happening in the law at all.
No.
Okay. Wow. That's very crazy. Well, again, glad that you were there and did some good stuff and had a good time. That's very cool. Got to hang out with your friends.
Yeah, it was fun.
Very, very
and
cool.
Even petitioning can be fun. It can be, although there are other times when you run through cold streaks that really test your mettle. But that didn't happen last week, fortunately.
Are you going to keep persisting on this because the election's when?
It's going to be
year, right?
It's well, I'm probably not going to gather any more signatures in Ohio. I might. It all depends when I'm back there. I might. The deadline is in early August on this particular petition, 2024. So if I go back and have some time, I'll do that.
But there are local libertarians down there that will keep persisting.
There damn well better be. I'll tell you that. No, they will soon be getting an email about the bill. Pardon me, somebody's moving furniture upstairs right now. We'll have a discussion about that after. But in any event, no, people in Ohio will soon be getting an email urging them to accept the Bill Redpath challenge. If Bill Redpath can go, I'm going to say 350, can get 350 in one day, then you should be able. Will you agree to pledge to go get 350 signatures over a year? We're talking like one sig a day.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Anyway, yeah.
All right, very cool. And all the petitioning, all the signatures have to be in by, you said, early August of next year? It's early
August. I think it's 90 days before Election Day, I think, is the deadline in Ohio.
And they're going to go over that. Okay.
So so there's going to be more than no labels. I mean, there are going to be several alternatives on most people's ballots next year.
So speaking of how like this next election is actually a bit different than other ones because people perceive it as having a great deal of cost if either side, depending on who wins, that kind of thing. I'm hearing a lot about the third parties. We're actually getting a lot of notoriety on the radio, at least, and in the news, because the Dems are freaking out over Cornel West. The Republicans are freaking out over Trump or whoever. It depends on who you are in the Republican Party. You're either freaking out over Trump or you're freaking out over everybody else against Trump. And no labels is coming up a lot. And like when you first brought them up a couple of weeks ago, that was the first time I ever heard of them. I don't know how I missed this. I listened to political news all day, every day. But somehow I missed them. And now I'm hearing them all over the place. Tell us more about what that no labels is. Because I hear that they're kind of like, they seem to be perceived, at least by the left radio shows I'm listening to, that they're kind of pro-Trump. That they like it automatically
no, that I wouldn't agree with that. No, I would not. There are some people who think that if no labels actually runs a presidential ticket, that it will help Trump if Trump is indeed the nominee, which is very questionable at this point. Sure. But in any event, hang on for a second. I just got to do that so people don't bother me anymore for the rest of the show. So in any event, what is No Labels? No Labels is an organization that has raised a lot of money. They have not disclosed who has given them money, but apparently some very wealthy people have given, and perhaps some non-wealthy people. I forget the sort of money, but they've got $70 million, I want to say. It's an 8-digit number, and they have been hiring professional petitioning firms to gather signatures on party petitions so that they can make the ballot and run a presidential ticket. They are only interested in running a presidential ticket. And I think, and in fact, they have said that if they think they're going to help Trump win in 2024, if he's the Republican nominee, right, even if he's not, he could run as an independent technically, but that they will suspend their effort. They will simply walk away from the whole thing. All the money that has been spent so far will have been ultimately wasted. And this has happened just 2012, back leading up to the 2012 election. There was an organization called Americans Elect, and they were going to run a centrist presidential ticket in 2012, and they never did. They never ran a single candidate for public office, to the best of my recollection. And it was sort of the same thing where we're going to put together a centrist ticket here and run them for the White House, and that completely fell apart. Nothing happened ultimately with America's Elect. So I don't know what's going to happen here, quite frankly. And I think it is. I think it's questionable right now, frankly, whether Trump. Here's the thing. I mean, it's going to be interesting if this trial in Washington starts January 2nd. Okay, suppose he's convicted. Suppose Donald Trump is convicted. Now you're the judge. Well, what do you do? All right. Suppose he's convicted. I mean, would the judge, some people think Donald Trump is a flight risk. All right. If he
I've wondered that often. Like, his own jet plane, just leave.
Yeah. And so, it'd be one way to get him out of the presidential election, huh?
Yes, that would
but seriously, I mean, suppose he's convicted. What do you do? I mean, I think that's an interesting question, and I could see a judge, right then and there, perhaps sentencing him right then and there, and saying, by the way, and I also direct you to surrender right now. I mean, I think that, and then so suppose Donald Trump goes to jail, however it happens. How do you house a former president in jail? I mean, there'd have to be some sort of security. He probably probably have to be separated from the other prisoners, I would think.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, I haven't heard anybody talk about that, but presents an interesting question. Are they going, is a judge going to let him go free and campaign for president and possibly, fly out of the country? I don't know.
Do we know, like, I hear a lot of uncertainty about, like, what happens if he does get convicted and can you still run as president? Like,
Oh, hell yes, you can run.
So
Eugene V. Debs did it.
Who?
Eugene V. Debs.
Oh, I love Eugene V. Debs. Yeah. Well, that's true. He did do it, but that was a long time ago. So I don't know. Okay. It hasn't changed.
As Irwin Schiff, the tax protester who's now deceased and unfortunately died in federal prison, which I think is truly horrible.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't agree with his thesis that there's not an income tax or that it's unconstitutional, and because that has been tried and that argument has failed in court many times. But for him to be terminally ill with lung cancer and die in a federal prison. But anyway, one time I was at it. He did at one time seek the Libertarian nomination for president. And he had a funny way of saying it. He says to somebody, it was to Harry Brown. This probably was 96, maybe he said to Harry Brown, he said, you'll have my support. He says, you won't get my vote, but you have my support. And but Trump might be in a situation where he's running for president but can't vote for himself.
Okay. But how do you become? I thought if you were a felon, you can't run for office.
No, I that may be true in certain states, but I'm pretty sure it's not true for federal office.
So he could literally be the president of the United States and incarcerated.
Yeah, absolutely. He could be in jail. He could. I mean, what if he's in jail, gets elected president, and then the inauguration has to be done in prison, after which he pardons himself and walks out. How about that?
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay. Okay. Well, speaking of that, we're already talking, but that's just very strange that he could do something like that. It's very weird. Like, I don't know. Okay. Let's talk about the new indictments from Georgia.
Okay. Well, I have not read it. I probably should have before this program, but I ran out of time. Just came out yesterday. And it is interesting to see that there are 18 people plus Donald Trump who are charged. And how's this trial going to work? Are they going to be tried separately? Are they going to be tried together? I don't know, but Giuliani, how far has that guy fallen? I mean, he was,
he's done.
He was, the nation's mayor on 9/11.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of people who thought his reputation as mayor of New York was greatly overstated, was not deserved. And there are people who, question some of that. But I mean, he was a beloved figure after 9/11. And wasn't he the person credited with cleaning up New York? I think so.
Especially when it came to the mob.
Yeah. And he was U.S. attorney at one time, I believe.
That's when he went after the mob. Sorry,
okay, he was U.S. attorney,
yes.
and then was mayor after that.
Right.
And now I just read somewhere where the felonies, he's facing 71 years in prison. Jeez. Based on the felonies he's charged with in Georgia. And he's admitted that he lied about the two poll workers who supposedly passed contraband of some sort between each other, and it turned out to be a breath mint. And so it's that's what I heard. So I guess he's already admitted that he made false statements about and these women, what they went through was horrible. I mean, they were pilloried by the MAGA crowd. Yeah. And I think I believe he's a defendant in a civil suit involving them. So
yes.
Whoa.
Yeah. Did they name the amount of indictments from Georgia?
I beg your pardon?
Did they give a number of charges from Georgia? Like, I know we were at 78 going in.
I did look at the list of people, and then with each person, they have a sequence of numbers. and each number represents a charge, and then they have an index with number 1 is this, number 2 crime is this, number 3 crime, and so it's detailed there, but there are something like 40 different specific crimes, but many of the people are charged with, more than one crime, and several.
So of the 18 people besides Trump, there's like person A might have 3, person B might have like 12, whatever, like that. Okay,
right.
Do we know how many are on Trump alone, or no?
I don't know. Glanced it seemed to me that maybe it was. I just glanced at it. It was struck me as maybe 8 charges against him, maybe it's 13. Something. There are several. I really don't recall how many.
Okay, that's fine. But so like we're at like right around like the high 80s, low 90s now, going into Georgia's indictments.
Something like that.
We're 78 going into to Georgia.
Yeah.
That's insane, man. Like you still have a lot of people like defending him, thinking it's all just like political theater and like a witch hunt and that kind of thing.
Oh, yeah, it's a witch hunt, of course.
The thing that I keep telling people that I know that's allude to these sort of things or wonder about it is that like there's 78, let's say I would say 78 charges against this guy. Not all of them have to be right. They get grounded and be proven. Just a handful of the right kind, and he's still screwed. Like, so you really should be concerned about the number. Go ahead.
Well, I just at this point, I mean, it's difficult to see how Donald Trump doesn't go to jail.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah. It's difficult to see how he does not go to jail for a while. And it's incredible. An incredible turn of events.
Has anybody had this many charges against them at once ever, like in any sort of crime ever? Like, this is an astonishingly high amount of crimes.
Yeah, it's I don't know the exact number. It was up. I thought it was up before Georgia. I thought it was like 70 or so charges. And so I think we're in the 80s now after Georgia. Wow. So, man.
That's crazy. Yeah, like I don't even know that. Like he's setting all sorts of records. Good for him, right?
Yeah, you got to wonder at some point here he's going to regret riding down that escalator back in.
I wonder about that too. If he's ever like why did I even do any of this? This is crazy.
Right. I mean, supposedly he didn't think he was going to get elected.
Well, that makes sense to me. I mean, obviously you can't prove it, but yeah, it's just it really seemed like once he was winning, he was like, oh, this wasn't supposed to happen.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So, we will see what happens. And like the whole, again, the uncertainty of or the certainty of the fact that he can be in prison and still be president and get out and like pardon himself and all this other, just like, good Lord, if he goes through that exact route that I just described and like becomes president in the Oval Office, I don't know what the state of this country would be like. I think people would really freak out over that. I
hope that there is somebody else who gets the Republican nomination. I may not like that selection. I can't say that anybody who's running for president right now grabs me. I will say that I will look forward. I've enjoyed Chris Christie's commentary on Donald Trump. That's been
like a pretty cool dude, yeah.
But at the same time, he worked in the Trump White House. He was an advisor to Trump during the first term.
Right.
So anyway.
Yeah, and it's really kind of it's unfortunate too to see this happens in all sorts of different campaigns and elections. It's not just this one, but just the hypocrisy and the selling out and that kind of thing. You had all these people, Ted Cruz and Chris Christie and Marco Rubio, who were just vehemently against Trump on the campaign trail. Then after he won, they were all his good buddies.
Right. And by the way, I listened to the Bull. In case people haven't heard of this, there is an interesting podcast series. They have one podcast a day. It's called The Bulwark, Bulwark. It's hosted by a guy by the name of Charlie Sykes, who is a Republican from Wisconsin who used to have a radio talk show not too long ago, for many years. I believe it was on WTMJ 620 AM out of Milwaukee, I think. And anyway, he doesn't have that anymore, but he has this podcast, and he is most definitely anti-Trump. and he has some people on there, but they've just produced a 7-part series. I haven't heard any of it, and each episode is probably at least a half hour, called "The Corruption of Lindsey Graham."
Ooh.
Yeah, there are 7 episodes, "The Corruption of Lindsey Graham," and Lindsey Graham was very vehement in his anti-Trump statements early on in the campaign,
Right.
and then he's been since morphed into one of DJT's most fervent defenders.
Absolutely.
And so anyway,
That's interesting. I'm going to have to check that out. Okay, the Bulwark. Okay, gotcha.
the Bulwark podcast.
Bulwark podcast. Okay, cool. All right, well, let's talk a little bit about the migration issue and what's going on in the cities. I mean, I don't have a lot of numbers or anything. I just hear a lot of complaining going on from the cities, the people that have lived there beforehand, that it's just too much too quickly. And like bad things are happening. Crime rates are going up. They're getting harassed by the migrants. Migrants are just kind of like, some of them are like the kids or whatever, just going around kind of like just doing whatever and vandalizing and all sorts of stuff. And the locals there, the natives there, perhaps, are just they're done with it. They're not having one. This is from a multitude of different cities that I'm hearing this: L.A., New York, Chicago. It's too much too soon.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I hear you, but this is an artifact of I don't know about the crime thing, but no doubt having a bunch of people who have limited resources, to put it mildly, that suddenly show up on your doorstep. Right. Yeah, you're right. It could be a problem, could be a big problem, and I think that this is an artifact of our immigration system not being well organized to make where it's nearly impossible to get in here legally. We ought to have a system whereby try to pair up employers with immigrants who want to come here. They're going to have to work unless they're independently wealthy, which almost none of them are going to be.
Yeah, why would they be coming here if they're
right? Yeah, exactly. So it's simply a situation where these people are desperate for a better life and they're willing to roll the dice. And there's no line to get it. They know that it's essentially impossible for them to legally immigrate to the United States. So they just come anyway and sort of barge on through. If we had a more rational immigration, put more resources, first of all, into processing people, which there's not enough of that, but made the system more open to immigration with work visas, this problem would be a lot less.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you know? And I don't know. I'm assuming something like this is happening, but I don't have any real data on it. Do you know? Is the federal government in any way trying to help these countries down there to relieve the conditions that are happening there that are forcing these people to migrate northward? Like, a lot of people are leaving like gang-ridden, cartel-ridden areas because it's so violent and awful. Like, and I don't blame them for that. But go ahead.
Whatever they're trying to do has got to be more than wiped out by prosecution of the drug war. And it was interesting. So I just saw a blog post today on cato.org where it said that there was a report from some government agency that inadvertently admitted that that prohibition fueled the drug cartels. It spoke about how drug cartels were getting out of marijuana dealing because of legalization in the United States in certain states. Yeah, and so they're moving it. So they're moving into other things like fentanyl and things because they can't make the sort of bucks they used to make when marijuana was illegal across all the states. And so there it is.
But I don't think it's something the federal government would entertain, is the decriminalization of all drugs. I have a very difficult time believing that they would do that. I wish they would. Yeah, I wish they would mind their own business, personally.
Yeah, it's certainly a long ways down the road. It's certainly not going to happen tomorrow. And supposedly, now, mind you, I subscribe to a lot of different things, including National Review, which of course is a conservative publication. But I agree with a lot of what I read on National Review. But there was this article which I have not read, supposedly saying that Oregon now is greatly regretting the drug decriminalization that they have done there. Well, I don't know. I'd have to, before I pass judgment on that, whether that is really so, I'd have to see it from more than one source. But you never know. I mean, but it's the first thing. I mean, it's still marijuana at the federal level is still a Schedule I illegal drug.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it is, and they have not normalized, the banking services to marijuana dispensaries in the various states. They've got problems handling too much cash, getting robbed, and that sort of thing. And on a prior broadcast of us, I stated that radio stations, I just saw in a broadcasting industry publication, basically an article that warned broadcasters, even if pot is legal in your state, don't do it. Don't accept advertising. Do not accept advertising of marijuana related products on radio and television stations. That won't fly.
That's interesting. Like, no, I can see. Well, the FCC, F stands for federal.
Right.
They'd probably go after you. I can see that. It's unfortunate because it's again stupid. But
they might try to take your license.
Yeah, no, I could see that very easily. That's so ridiculous. Again, fascists of collective consciousness. That's what FCC stands for. Because they try to control your language. Which means they can try to control your mind. They just stick to like aviation and all that stuff like that. That's fine.
Well, that's the FAA, and that needs help too.
But doesn't the FCC have something to do? Anyway, but I'm confusing things. I think. Okay. Anyway. Okay. Well. Okay. We'll see what happens there.
Mm-hmm.
And I've heard things like that about Oregon, or at least Portland as well. The decriminalization of it is causing problems. I lived in Portland for, 12 something years. And it always had a huge homeless issue, well before the decriminalization of even marijuana. It was just a huge issue there because it's very kind of like a moderate climate and that kind of thing. And you can kind of hang out there all winter. And it's not too terribly bad. Sometimes it gets bad, but not like, not like Chicago. Oh my God.
Right.
And so a lot of people say there's no causal connection there. Like they already had a problem before the decriminalization happened. Like you can't draw it might have gone up a little bit, but it's not like, the root cause of it is the decriminalization. But some people say it is, I don't know, I don't know how you do that. But I remember going back there before the pandemic visiting, and the homeless issue was a lot worse. Like they're just everywhere. And I'm like, do you guys see this as a problem? Like, is this something you want to solve, or are you just going to let this happen? And they all say, well, we're trying to get, the politicians to do something about it, but they don't seem willing to do anything about it. So I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, I was out in Portland on a business trip in December 2021. And there was definitely a lot of homelessness around just the whole downtown. Well, plus, even in December 2021, they were still taking COVID really seriously in Portland.
Yes.
And a lot of businesses still shut down, where I had to wear a mask all the time in this office building where I was working. I just for a moment, just for a fraction of a minute at one point, I wasn't thinking or something. My mask wasn't on my face in this, and I was not near people, but there was a security guard who was on me within 30 seconds or less. Sir, put your mask on, and so anyway, Portland's downtown in December 2021 was not looking good. And then I stayed at the Portland Hilton Hotel.
Mm-hmm.
And then I read just a few months later that the hotel the owner of the hotel stopped paying the mortgage, and they were handing the hotel over to the banker. They stopped paying the mortgage on that hotel and turned the keys over to the banker and said, it's yours.
Oh, wow. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Huh. I didn't know that. Okay. I mean, I know that's happening with a lot of small businesses, but I didn't. That's too bad.
Mhm.
Okay, we only got a couple minutes left here. Cubs are doing great. Bears looked awesome. Did you get a chance to at least hear about the preseason game the other day?
They beat Tennessee, as I recall, something like
They
that.
beat Tennessee, and they were down for a lot of the game and came back and won it. I think it was 21-17 or something like that.
Okay. Well,
Uh,
I've heard good things about Justin Fields this year. That's good.
yeah.
The White Sox and the Cubs. They didn't play last night. They're playing tonight at
Oh,
Wrigley.
really? No, I didn't. They usually
Yeah,
get
White
a.
Sox are at the Cubs tonight,
I get a
and
prompt usually. I didn't get it. Okay.
and I don't think they played last night. Of course, the White Sox, if they come back, it's if they come back and make the play, it's going to be the biggest miracle in about 2,000 years.
I think they'd have to win every single game or something. It's just,
I remember there's a radio talk show host in New York called Mike Francesa, by the name Mike Francesa, and it's sort of a sport among listeners of the station to call up and do prank calls on Mike Francesa.
I love
and,
that.
And one guy called up once and said, Mike, is there a chance that a baseball team could go in one season, could go 162-0?
There's a record. There's a record for most amount of wins. I think it's around 110.
But the really good, one really good crank call was had to do, some guy calls up. It was brilliant how he manipulated Francesa into saying exactly what he wanted, and then he came up with the punchline. We called up and he talks about Aaron Judge, and this was a year or two ago with the New York Yankees. He says, would you say that Aaron Judge right now, with the season he's having, that he's on track to have as good a career as Mickey Mantle? And he says no. He says you'd have to be an idiot to say that. And he says I forget what year it was. Was it 1956? I forget the year, but there was a year where Mickey Mantle won the Triple Crown. And he compares the number of homers that Aaron Judge had a season or two ago, a couple years ago, to the number of homers that Mantle had when he won the Triple Crown back in the 1950s. And Francesa says, Mickey Mantle back in 1956 or whatever. He says, Mickey Mantle won the Triple Crown that year. And the person responds, how could he win the Triple Crown if he's not a horse?
Right. That's what I was funny. Okay, that's funny.
And yeah. So anyway, the Triple Crown, for people, the Triple Crown being leading the league in home runs, RBIs, and batting average in baseball. Anyway, but I thought that was, and immediately, Francesa, hangs up on him and says, I said, I don't understand why people, they're on hold for an hour. They're on hold for an hour and they just want to get on and act like an ass. Hilarious. It's absolutely hilarious.
That is funny. I love that kind of stuff. I love prank phone calls. The radio station won't let me do it, but I always wanted to.
I know that's the downside of caller ID.
I know. It's almost impossible now.
I mean, I am nearly moved to tears when I think that young boys can no longer call middle-aged women they don't know on the phone and ask them if their refrigerator is running.
Right, exactly. It's a sad state of being.
It's sad, it is, yes.
Do you ever listen? Do you remember the Jerky Boys? Does that ring a bell?
No, I don't remember.
They were just two guys in New York who just they had character voices. Frank Rizzo was one of them. They would just call whatever and just hassle and harass and they were hysterical.
What did you ever see Crank Yankers?
Yeah. Oh, sure. With the puppets?
Yeah, the puppets. Yeah. And though there were some hilarious Crank Yankers at one point was extremely funny. I think the quality of the crank calls was on Comedy Central.
Right.
And people recorded real crank phone calls with people, and then they acted them out with puppets. And some of the phone calls were hilarious. Okay. Were hilarious, but the quality of the writing went down. Later on, the calls were not as funny, and they just sort of became cruel, in my opinion. And then the show ended, and that was it. But when in its heyday, there were some pretty darn funny prank phone calls on Crank Yankers.
Yeah, no, I've seen a couple of episodes of it. It's funny. Is that the show where they ended up using like celebrity voices and doing prank calls?
Yeah. Like Wanda Sykes.
Yeah,
she was one.
Sarah Silverman, I think, was one.
Yeah. They had some celebrities do some of the crank calls, and some of them were hilarious. Some of those calls.
That's good stuff. But like nowadays, like you said, like with all the caller IDs and I can block your number and So privacy is gone, and that's unfortunate. But all right, cool. Well, I guess we're done. All right, thanks so much, Bill, and again, congratulations on all your efforts and all your accomplishments. That's very cool. Keep that up.
Appreciate it.
Everybody, thank you very much for tuning into Perspectives, third party talk show with Libertarian and Green Party perspectives. And we'll be back next week. Till then, take care.
So long.
So long. Do.